Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Dr. Farrick's good to see you. Again, we've been spending a lot of quality time together. We were in Pittsburgh last week to see the great work that the Pittsburgh Public Schools are doing in the area of educator effectiveness. I wasn't going to say anything about Common Core, but my colleague and I have had a lot of discussions on this, and I'll just make a statement at the outset that I firmly believe that we should be constantly having a conversation as to how we make our curriculum more rigorous and strengthening our curriculum and ensuring that we're aligning our instructional curriculum to our state standards, our rigorous state standards. So I'm sure that discussion will continue in the months to come. I'd like to thank you very much also for the very specific examples that you provided in terms of the impact on the prevailing wage, and I'm absolutely supportive of your approach on this. I think it's important to note that what you're proposing in terms of the mandate waiver with prevailing wage does not in any way alter or amend the prevailing wage law. What you're saying is when an elected school board expressing the will of the people that they represent opt to apply for a waiver to the provisions of the prevailing wage law, they ought to be able to do that. I think that is a common sense, reasonable approach for us to take. I think, frankly, whose time has long since come. I appreciate also, and now I'll get to the question, I appreciate very much your comments on economic furlough. And Dr. Frericks, you mentioned, we've discussed this before, your belief that school board members, I'm reading right from your testimony, school board members and administrators who are entrusted to make hiring decisions in the best interest of the district and the students they serve should likewise be entrusted with the ability to decide which employees are best qualified. I appreciate the understanding that as we've visited this issue in the past here, and I'm confident there are members who are concerned today, with that level of flexibility, that those decisions will not be made in an objective or fair way. And I appreciate the comments on, I think, the impact the educator effectiveness tool will have, will give us an additional tool to make those decisions. My question for you is, I've thought a lot about this issue, and particularly after being in Pittsburgh, a school district that did have to make a number of very difficult decisions in terms of furlough, and they had at their fingertips the data in terms of the impact that teachers were having on student learning. They've been involved in this educator effectiveness for 5 years. And so I just want to throw it out for your comments and also for my colleagues to consider as we take perhaps a step in this direction, perhaps a compromise effort on this. What would your reaction be to legislation that would give you the flexibility in terms of the economic furlough? Those decisions would be based primarily on seniority, with the exception that we could agree that we ought to protect teachers who are distinguished. I think we should at least come to an agreement that those teachers in which we are receiving or we have the data, now understand we have to implement the system first and implement it well, so I'm not trying to rush into this, but just now for the conversation, can we at least agree that we should protect those teachers who are improving student outcomes, doing great work in our schools, and are rated as distinguished? I'd appreciate your thoughts on that.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. If we have a system in place that allows us to collect that data consistently throughout the state, I would echo your comments. The one thing as we move into this new system and that we have to account for, that we need to be careful of, I think we need to remember that 40%, up to about 40% of our staff aren't the clear-cut second grade teacher where we see growth. It can be a guidance counselor, it can be a school nurse, where those metrics are not as easy to define. Obviously, you know, the distinguished educator, that makes great sense. What worries me is when you look programmatically at things like family consumer science, tech ed, and their relation to student achievement, which we debate, and they certainly have a role, it's not as easy to measure. And when you talk about furloughs within, let's say, departments like that, it's a challenge, and it's not one that would probably just come back to seniority, because it's not easy to measure. Those are the positions that I was alluding to.
Chair, thanks the gentleman, and